Thank you for watching the Housing Oregon YouTube channel. Be sure to join our network and get involved in the work that we are doing. If you can, please like and subscribe. It helps us build this channel, which serves as a platform to communicate with our members. This video is part of our 2025 annual conference. We're looking for folks to be on the conference planning committee. Please email info@housingoregon.org.
I'm Terry Bradley. I am the Portfolio Support Manager at Oregon Housing and Community Services. For those of you that have never heard of me or never heard of this thing called Portfolio Support, well, lucky for you, we're going to share with you today how we came to be, what it is, what it's not, how it works with our partners at the agency, and also, I'm going to sit down, with our partners out there. So I know you guys are probably curious about what exactly are you going to learn from Chrislyn and myself today? Well, exactly, I'm sharing with you on the screen. And what do we have for you today? We're going to do a high-level conversation as it relates to what is the ARH. And for those of you that don't know about all of the acronyms we use or try to use, ARH is Affordable Rental Housing. So we have been undergoing a complete restructure. It's been in the making. I think we finally landed last year on a soft landing, and we've been migrating all of this year and trying to make it become a reality. And I think you will agree at the end of today, we're pretty much successful. We have some more growing pains and some work to do, but we're definitely making it happen. We're also going to talk briefly on property improvement plans, another acronym for you, PIPs. I wasn't sure what PIPs were, but now I know, and so will you when we're done. I'm happy to share that earlier this year we were successful in launching an updated tax credit compliance manual. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that entails and what you can expect if you haven't already explored the content. Along with that, we also were successful in sharing with all of you a updated average income test policy, which is applicable for a minimum set aside that got introduced several years ago. Well, maybe not several, but a few years back. And so this again was intended to give you updated guidance. This probably isn't that popular, but it's one that you guys have asked a lot of questions about, and that's regarding new programs that we are utilizing with how we approach compliance, our monitoring, and then also forms to support the new guidance. We're going to do a high-level conversation on what to expect from those. Additionally, beyond that, right underneath, you'll see we have, this is really fun, guys, so if you haven't already, please sign up. We had our very first one last week, and it's a new partner operations monthly call. We're fondly referring to it as Portfolio Connect call. Kind of fun, huh? And then with that, we're going to wrap it up with a rent increase policy. You know, I think it's always good to revisit, the requirements that we have implemented at the agency, just so you can be a good partner. It maybe take away the confusion. I'm also going to ask that you guys don't be shy, okay? Even you in the back room. If you have a question, we do take questions, right, Chrislyn? Yep, we're going to take questions.
We're hoping to leave a little time at the end also but we've got a lot to cover, so we're going to go fast.
Am I talking fast? No, just kidding. We're going to go really fast. So what is new actually in Portfolio? You're going to see here on the slide, this basically, I know, I think we need to move. Hang on, I don't know how to make it move. All right, it's redesign. We do know how to spell, I promise. So so what happened, we had a consultant come in and take a look at how our current state of affairs was. What were we doing? What was working? What wasn't working? And as you all know, when you start growing, as we were doing, then you have to adjust. You have to pivot to meet the demands. And with that, out of that, we came up with a redesign of how our operations and how we live inside inside the agency. So we have landed, as you can see, with a section referred to as portfolio management and a section that we refer to as portfolio support. And I think that I'm going to kind of just go ahead and move forward to this slide here to kind of give you a broader overview of what that looks like. Within portfolio management, you're going to see 4 teams. Historically, most of you are familiar with let's say within the last 5 years, if you were to reach out to Oregon Housing, you might learn we had 2 compliance teams, you know, that where the compliance analyst lived basically, and they would come out and do the monitoring reviews. On the other side, somewhere over, not in a corner, but on the other side of the aisle, we had asset management. And what we discovered was that there was a need to bring the 2 together. And under we have a portfolio, excuse me, I'm going to back up a little bit. Our deputy director, most of you know her as Tanya Evans. So she oversees this entire portfolio operations. What you're not seeing on the slide, we also include our partners over in HCA, HUD Contract Administration. And so that section also lives in the same body that we're at. Within portfolio management, we've gone from 2 managers up to 4, and Krislin's going to really share the dynamics of how that works, what makes up those teams. And then you can see over on the other side, we have portfolio support. When we went through this restructure, it was obvious we needed to, 1, combine forces internally so that we could be a better partner with those of you in the room. It was obvious that asset management works very cohesively, almost like a glove, with compliance. And when you take a look at those dynamics, then how do we stand that up? Which is why we formed portfolio support. Because you need also, I think most of you would recognize, we went from 2016 to 2025 really needing to update some of our manuals. We had program updates. We had guidance from the IRS. We had guidance from HUD. And we were so busy, you know, driving the car or rowing the boat that I think without the attention to how do you keep things working cohesively and efficiently, we just didn't have our eye on the needle. So with portfolio support, what we're trying to do is stand up, updating our program manuals, the compliance manuals, you know, because we do rely on the guidance that is included in those documents. We also, within portfolio support, we've taken on some other charges, but I think what I want to wrap up with this slide here, because I am going to introduce portfolio support a little bit more closer here, is recognizing we have now 4 teams for portfolio management. We have portfolio support. We are all now focused on moving forward. A lot of these changes went into place back in December so that we were able to kick the ground running in January of 2025 of this year. And I think some of you have already seen some of the changes that have been made, or you're feeling the changes that are coming out from our agency. What exactly is portfolio support? Well, let's go ahead and introduce that to you. I'm the purple box, just so you know. I'm the manager of portfolio support. I come to this position with more than 30 years within the industry. Some of you I know from my previous life when I owned a property management company. Some of you I met when I was out traveling, doing, program training opportunities. And for the last 3.5 years, I've landed at Oregon Housing and Community Services. I am very excited to be able to share with you some of the updates we're doing, the challenges we faced, and hopefully get some feedback from all of you on how we can continue our growth in a positive way. I have currently 7 staff there at Portfolio Support that are focused on meeting the needs that we're trying to achieve. We have a multifamily program analyst where the primary purpose of that position is to help us stay current with our compliance manuals. Be able to present to all of you technical advisories and just to keep an awareness of what's happening within the industry. We have 3, 4 senior compliance analysts on the team, ranging from regulatory compliance to I call her a SME. She's a subject matter expert in Inspire. Some of you were just in that room. Well, we're also trying to help stand up that new requirement with the Inspire methodology. A senior asset management analyst is also on my team. So if we dive into those needs that might be more on the regulatory documents, transfers, things like that, we have support for you as well as our coworkers there. And then we have a few others that are, their mission is to kind of help keep the, us moving smoothly with the body of work that we're doing. Wow, look at the ripple effect. Did you guys see that? Do you want me to go back and do it again? I thought it was kind of fun. So what here? This is basically a high level of what Portfolio Support does. As you can see, we're going to be providing internal training. That's for all of you that work with me at Oregon Housing. And also we're going to be extending out across the aisle. We've done some already with external training, not only on the programs, but also on those lovely forms that all of you like. The updating of the program compliance manuals. We're going to talk about the most recent one. And basically, we do both, update, and we will be creating or designing some new ones. Process documentation. Again, that is designed to make it seamless when you're working with a partner at Oregon Housing, that you're hearing similar to one voice, to where you're not getting different answers or different processes from those that you work with at the agency. So again, we're taking a different approach, or I should say a renewed approach, to how we document the process so that we can be repeating it, muscle memory, so to speak. Plus, I think all of us would recognize that when you have something written down to refer to, that it's easier to go back and repeat it rather than go, oh man, what did I do last time I had this question? I mean, I've been there. I'm sure some of you in the room have been there. And then you make a different decision. It's not the same. And then you have that ripple effect again. It's not being similar to what's being stated. Also, Portfolio Support will be updating and creating forms. We're excited to get feedback from all of you in the room to what's working, what's not working, how can we improve what we've currently got in place, the Portfolio Connect call, and also technical advisories. Are you guys ready for some more? Am I talking too fast? Oh, good. So I can keep on going. Almost your turn, Chrislyn. Now we get to the super support. This is kind of fun as well. This here is not exactly designed to tell you what we do within Portfolio Support. It's to give you maybe an insight to what we've done, what we've created, and what we're gearing up to do. Now remember, we're just only 9 months in. We're still relatively a new section at the agency, but we are building this on relationships with operations, with development, with program. I know there's somebody else out there where we're technical advisories, all at the agency, to where we're trying to hear all the voices that are being, that are sharing their insight, their experience, so that we can be collectively working together with you. The Tax Credit Compliance Manual. I'm not going to stand, I'm sitting. We're not going to spend too much time here because I'm going to actually walk you through how that was created and the methodology we're using as we go forward. Would love your feedback. New program requirements. We've incorporated those new program requirements in our manuals. And again, we're talking about standing out and maybe doing some more in training on those. But those two primary ones that most of you have had some experience with or an introduction to include HOTMA and Inspire. Process mapping, we are already working our way through several processes at the agency to put that into motion and implementing them. We're currently looking at our management agent packets. Some of you call those maps, and again, that's being reviewed and look to see how it can be better streamlined, where we can make improvements on it. We've almost are done with a utility allowance process mapping. For some of you, you're like, well, we look at those all the time, but there are things about that process that are very important to understand. We've got some new developments coming out or new announcements. And so we're taking a look at that holistically to see how we can, again, give you updated guidance. For those of you that are been in your position for a while or those of you that are brand new, this is a very important piece of the rent calculation at our affordable housing properties. So again, having a good, clear understanding of the utility allowance and what may be expected or not expected, we felt was a good item to, to track and to map out. Oh, and CCPCs. I know all of you have had, well, maybe not all of you, but that is your annual event. And again, it's we've been process mapping that out because we would like, again, to take the mystery out of it, how to better streamline it, what's working, not working, because it is a required process on all of our programs. Some of you have a little bit more extra work to do, but again, we recognize that it's a huge undertaking at the site level, so we are mapping it out on our end to see how we can, again, be a good communicator, and also in how we get those processed at the agency level. So if you have any questions or concerns or comments to share, we welcome those regarding that process. We just began our monthly Partner Connect call. We're actually going to call it a Portfolio Connect call, and those are monthly. More on that one later. Manuals under construction. I'm happy to share that we are. Yes, we are. The manuals that are currently under construction include LIFT, which is, we've been hearing our partners ask for that. I know in the past we basically say just go to the tax credit compliance manual. And in most cases, that's been really good guidance. But we also have determined we need a LIFT compliance manual for our partners that have 100% LIFT, and they just want to go there and not go through all of the other items of compliance on a monitoring thing or regulatory that have nothing to do with their property. The other manuals under construction include some guidance on the permitted supportive housing, also PSH. We do have a section we incorporated this last update to the tax credit manual, giving you some insight to that program, but again, recognizing we need to provide guidance to you. As your partner, we need to be able to give you some clear guidance on those pieces. And then the Elderly and Disabled Bond Compliance Manual. Used to have one, not sure where it went, I found it, but it is being updated as well. Clipping right along, we're going to dive right into that tax credit compliance manual. And first off, you're going to see brand new look. Yay! Updated and expanded content within it, and also those new program highlights that I mentioned to you. This was published back in April of this year. And let's take a closer look at exactly what you're going to find on the inside. This was a huge undertaking. The manual was, had lots of information in it, maybe not as easily located. And so what we tried to achieve was how, if we were the end user, what would make this more user-friendly. It's got a click and go where you can click on the table of contents and land where you want to. But we actually took the content and divided it up into 13 sections. And within each section, you're going to find there is a part or multiple parts. So again, it's sections, not actions. But just to give you kind of an example of how we divided them up. Section 1 was the program overview. Section 2, compliance overview. Section 4 has 33 parts in it that dives into minimum set aside, renting, just key components. What is this 8609 form? Why do we care about line 8B? We try to take those types of questions and put them into that one area so you could scan through them. Section 6 is really, one of my favorite ones, because as you're going to see, the example on how we took a section and created parts within it. Section 6 is dedicated to acquisition rehab and resyndication. We were discovering, not just from new staff coming to the agency, but also from partners, there's a different approach for compliance as it relates to an acquisition rehab, and trying to put that all in one area rather than spreading out certifications in multiple locations. If it's relative to this event, then let's put it in one space to where you can navigate through and understand, okay, what is the complexity of this program, or this, how do I stay in compliance if it's an acquisition rehab? What do we do if there's a resyndication of credits? Again, recognizing these are all similar in nature, we put it into a section, and we divided the material into what we refer to as parts. A real quick summary of what you find in this manual. Real quick, I'm talking at you guys. With a show of hands, how many here in the room have had the opportunity to go take a peek or a walk through this new compliance manual? Okay, some of you, not all of you, so I invite you to do so. The summary of changes that stood out the most to me include we took content and we expanded it, or gave, maybe more examples. We also added clarity to the minimum set aside. We added the average income component to it as well. Overcharged rents. I mean, again, that kind of is something, once you fully understand why that is important to recognize, we don't want to be overcharging rents. The vacant unit rule, I think there was some mystery on that. So again, going to the guide provided to us, which is simply a guide, going to the 8823 guide, it's not formal guidance, it's not meant to give you anything relevant, but other than a guide to tell you this is out of compliance, this is how you get back. There's no legal authority in it, but we borrowed from the content of that guide available to us by the IRS to kind of help put into print what it means for some of these rules. Section 504, in the room here, how many of you are TCAP or ARA on your property? Anyone? How many of you are layered with project-based Section 8? All right, this applies to you. All right, just so you know, it's whenever you have federal funds on a property. So we thought that was important, again, to recognize that if you were one of those unique tax credit properties and you had federal funds, you would find that that applies to you. VAWA, Violence Against Women Act. Again, it was reauthorized in 2022, which happened after the last manual update. So we thought that it was important to bring you an awareness of how that works. URA, Uniform Relocation Act of 1973. Again, who has project-based Section 8 on their property? This applies to you as well. I mean, this is where you would need to know the guidance on what do you do if you're an acquisition and you got this population and you go to establish those first-year credits and you got over-income households. Again, we felt that it was important to give you some guidance on how you navigate those challenges. The administrative notebook is, at Oregon Housing, we want to see an administrative notebook at your property. We provide guidance on what we want included in there. It helps anyone that's showing up at the site, whether they're a new hire or there's somebody covering, or just for the current staff to have an understanding of how to manage compliance at their property. Going on, the other changes in the manual included the acquisition rehab section. In 7, we get questions. What about a waiting list? Can we keep it electronically? The answer is yes. but you have to have a written process that explains how you're going to manage that waiting list. So we included guidance in this updated manual. Correcting documents. If you're a compliance analyst and you're going out looking at files, everything, and if you see this squiggly line, you can't even see what's underneath it, that's kind of a red flag. So again, we try to provide you with guidance that's relative to your files, also to help support the gift that the IRS gives you should you correct non-compliance prior to getting our letter that we're going to visit you. This, I think, will help you with that. HOTMA, Inspire, and then we really went into a lot of detail on the non-compliance piece. Average income test. Is there anyone here in the room that is at a property that elected this wonderful minimum set aside, brand spanking new? Anyone? Don't be shy. This is going to really make your life easier. We have one person here that said, me, I do. When this came out in 2018, the IRS just landed it in our laps with no guidance. Then they came out with guidance, and it was bad. It was really, really, really bad. So as a protective measure, our first policy was cumbersome. You know, it was not appealing. It was a little bit hard on how you were going to navigate it. And then the IRS came out in 22 with actual good guidance that we can make this program or this new set-aside work. It's really good for preservation for existing properties when you have a combination of different income levels already residing in that property to where you can help them stay in that property. It's, I think, allows for an opportunity of diversity because you can see that your income levels can go as low as 20% and as high as 80%. What you have to demonstrate per building is an average of 60%. All right, so again, that's one of the criterias. In the new guidance from the IRS, it allowed us a way to demonstrate to our partners how they can maintain compliance with this new minimum set aside. So I think this is pretty exciting. It's not designed based on the actual income of the household. It's by the unit. So, and they're whole percentage increments. You can't be a 55% average income. You'd have to be a whole number. You'd be 50 or you'd be 60. If you're over 50, then that unit would have to be a 60. So again, recognizing that when you're looking at an AMI of a household, you have to round up, you don't round down, so that you get them adequately placed in the correct set aside. And then I believe the biggest impact here is for the averaging. How are you guys doing? Good. Any questions? Any yahoos? Any attagirls? No? Okay. Oh, Kristen gave me an attagirl. All right. So let's go ahead and just real briefly jump into the next slide. That was a door I just walked you through, just so you know. That was a door. Want me to go back through it again? No. Okay. So we have new program requirements. I mentioned Inspire, which is basically how we approach doing your physical inspections of the property. HOTMA, big topic, a lot of questions. It's been a hard rule to roll out because HUD made it happen, and HUD is going to be the last one to the door. I mean, it's just, I can't, we took some proactive steps, but there are reasons why Oregon Housing took the steps we did, because we wanted to be in time, not behind the 8 ball, and also be able to be a good partner with our HCA partners. And we were just getting a lot of questions. So when we went to HOTMA, which is the one I wanted to focus on today, again, it is the Housing Opportunity Through Modernization Act. HUD's been talking about this since 2016. I mean, what I would say the positive out of all of this was how we've landed, where we have the opportunity to be in alignment with each other, where we're not going to have different rules. And we've had some other changes since then that will help the alignment be even more achievable. So what I've highlighted here, 2023 in September, we actually got a publication that, it was a HUD notice that we were able to go in, take a look at, and see, okay, how can we make this fit for the programs within portfolio? Currently, our federal programs include the low-income housing tax credit. We also have home. We have National Housing Trust Fund, and then we have several of our state-funded programs. So when this notice came out, issued in September of 2023, we knew it was going to be a challenge to get it across the finish line. And HUD kept moving the date. They kept trying to figure out, okay, not going to do it now. The software wasn't ready, and we were being asked questions on, when's it coming? Because we all want to know how to do our job. And it's kind of scary when you don't know how to do your job. Is it ready to go? Do we wait? So we took a leap of faith. Back in 2024, we published a technical advisory. And within this technical advisory, we shared what our intent was. Part of it was to align with National Council of State Housing Finance Agencies. That's where all of us state housing finance agencies come together collectively, and nobody wants to create forms just from scratch. So we relied on them. They rolled out their best practice forms, and we went, aha, I think we're ready to go ahead and start this process. We're going to begin, because it was making sense on how it would simplify the process. It would get our partners familiar with new rules. A lot of the items that were being introduced in HOTMA were introduced by HUD back in 2014. When they did change 4, a lot of the methods of verification were already in place. We were just late out of the gate, I guess. So we issued this technical advisory that we were going to begin HOTMA. We were going to be introducing the methodology. We knew that the guidance was going to be coming out in our compliance manuals. Home manual already had it in place. Tax credit got a little bit delayed, but we knew that that compliance manual would also include guidance on how to implement HOTMA. And we went to our current forms. We looked at the forms that we were going to need to roll out, and we made another shift. We decided to start going back to giving the form a form name. So you're going to see here that with this TA, we said, okay, they're available. We want you to start using them in January, but definitely by February 1st of 2025. Yeah. And then at that time, HUD said, well, guess what? We're going to make it July 1st is our new date. Well, sorry, guys. They're back to January, I think, of next year. We didn't stop. Once we started the process, once we started the conversation, we wanted our partners to continue going through the motions of implementing the new guidance, becoming familiar with the forms. So with the forms came frustration. We have heard you loud and clear. I know there was some confusion because now we have some new rules. You have new rules and new forms. So all I can say is that we're looking at a way to have a conversation on how to take some of the more complex forms that are related to assets and do some kind of a live webinar at some point to where you can become a little bit more warm and fuzzy with those. So the CM stands for compliance mandatory. If you had a CR, it would be compliance recommended. So we changed required to mandatory to have no confusion with too many CRs. And then we also said, okay, this form is being revised. I know you guys have said we don't like this one. It's the applicant questionnaire. We went from a 1-page to a 5-page. It's a compromise, guys. We needed to be able to stand up HOTMA. All right, in order to make HOTMA work for all of us, we needed a little more detail on the front end than on the back end. So then we've got that. Then we have our lovely new forms, which are all stars, and that's where we went into the asset self-certification because the threshold went up and how we determine income from an asset changed. So we needed to be better equipped to guide you through that. So we have asset self-certification. Let's see if I can get the green buggy to work here. There we go. Asset self-cert replaces the under 5,000. Asset self-certification worksheet guides you through the process. And then we got the affidavit of student financial assistance because with HOTMA came new income calculations for tax credit. We now don't get to ignore it. We have to start including it. So this again was designed to help you with that. The other item that came out of HOTMA that I find to be very exciting, I know, what can I say? I like this part. They simplified the verification. I've worked in compliance. I've owned a management company. I was a compliance analyst. And I'll tell you what, trying to get somebody to answer a question on employment that it makes sense is like, it don't work. So you spend a lot of time chasing answers. So the methods of verification under HOTMA actually streamline that. And like I said, HUD already started this back in 2014. So I encourage you to go ahead and take some time in reviewing what those methods are, how they work. Do you currently have forms that make sense on how you navigate that? Well, I'm done about portfolio support. I think I've kind of given you a kind of a picture. I've got someone over here I want you to meet, and I think she's got some exciting news to share with you as well. Here you go, Chrislyn.
Now, what do I say? Right? Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Chrislyn Prennell. I'm the Assistant Director for Portfolio Management. I thought it was great that Terry did the introduction to explain what the support piece is. The most exciting thing I think that came out of our restructure was the realization of gaps, of things that we weren't doing well. One of those was connecting compliance and asset management, a huge issue for me. I advocated for that very heavily in all my daily work prior to this position, and then recognizing the degree of support that we needed. And so I think that, while compliance and asset management work was continuing, we were recognizing that we could be doing that so much better. I wanted to introduce the structure that we have so that you can familiarize yourself with what your resource is and how we can better support being good partners. You're going to hear me say that a lot, and not just because we refer to our owners and management companies as partners. I truly mean that, and so we're always looking for feedback on how we can be better partners. One of those ways is our structure. We now have 4 instead of 2. We have 4 teams. For lack of a better way of calling them, they're portfolio A through D. Those teams are combinations of asset management and compliance staff with varying levels of support. And for the most part, these teams are divided by property management company to better meet the needs of what's unique about that portfolio. Not all teams are structured that way. In fact, the Portfolio A team, which we have several representatives from that team here today, they're primarily dedicated to support the needs of housing authorities and other government-like structured entities to meet those unique needs, regardless of property management company. We're also not exclusively divided by property management company because we can't control that, and it would skew the balance between the teams. So as a state housing finance agency, we're obligated to monitor the overall health and operations of the portfolio, to protect and mitigate risk across the portfolio for affordable rental housing. And in that, we are charged with monitoring for indications of risk or exposure. And so all the various things that we do regulatory audits, compliance inspections, operations and management, rent increase requests. I'll talk a little bit more about that. Utility allowance acknowledgments, which is something that's new. Loan servicing and monitoring for our direct lending programs, such as elderly and disabled bond. LIFT is basically a direct lending, and risk share, the HUD risk share program. Reserve for replacement requests that are associated with those programs. Tenant complaints, property management assistance, transfers and other real estate transactions. And the portfolio support provides a bridge, not just for our partners, but also across our team, so that we're consistent with those monitoring practices and what you can expect as outcomes. And unlike Terry, I don't love public speaking. In fact, if anybody's familiar with the Brady Bunch, right? I remember way back when an episode that everybody's wearing underwear right now, and we're good. So this was one of my favorite things, is to get into the numbers. I wanted to put things into perspective. This may not be a surprise to you. It is rewarding to me to think about the magnitude of the work that you're all doing. So I wanted to run through some of this. So our great state is nearly 100,000 square miles. That's pretty big, right? 1,312 affordable rental housing developments are across those 100,000 miles. And of that, 58,684 units of affordable rental housing are provided in that state. That is a lot. And I think that when you consider the consolidation of the work that we do at OHCS in portfolio management with the help from portfolio support, is it's really significant, and the collaboration between those two groups, I think, is instrumental to really being effective and successful. And when I talked about earlier about that partnership, I think this is where that all comes to fruition, is as we begin to bridge those things and be responsive and reactive for those in a way that promotes the thing that we all want, and that's successful operations for our affordable rental housing for as long as we can possibly squeeze the lemon out of the juice out of the lemon, right? And aligning those interests across the portfolio really promotes the most comprehensive analysis of risk that we can have on both parts, for you and for us. Next slide. So during a property review at OHCS, as vulnerabilities are identified, an analysis is performed in an effort to figure out what the cause of issues are, getting to the crux of those things. And that work involves interaction and exchange of information between our property management companies, or our owners and operators, and our asset management staff. When an issue is identified or confirmed, or one is reported to us from one of our partners, our intention is to engage in an effort to try to figure out what the solution is. What's the optimal? How can we fix this, and what can we do? And supporting that development of a plan is part of that process. That property improvement plan is actually what we call a TIP. How about a PIP? Is a tool for collaborated risk management. But it's really more about a process. Go ahead. Conditions that necessitate a PIP can be discovered through a variety of means. One is which is when we do a review, we do an annual analysis of risk on all of our portfolio properties. It can be when we do a compliance assessment, when a partner reports that there's a problem, or observations that are made otherwise. We hear in the news that there's an issue with a property, and then we have to respond to that. And so what goes into a PIP? When we identify these issues, or there are inconsistencies found, we dig in a little bit deeper. That exchange of information I referenced earlier is part of that engagement process, as we look to find what the causes are, and to find out from our operators and our property management companies, what is the existing strategy for that. It's not like we're creating the strategy ourselves. We often understand that those strategies already exist, and the purpose of a property improvement plan is to establish those and just to document them and add them to the record. And then we leave you alone. We turn it off, we walk away, we give some time, and we come back to see how that's working. Offer consultation if that's also necessary. And so the process is kind of a back and forth. We figure it out. Once we get to a place where we think that a solution has been identified, we leave it alone, and then we come check back in and see how things are going. three areas of of the property improvement plan is to determine what the problem is, establish the standard to give you a guidance for what we'd expect it to look like if there weren't a problem or an issue, and then to document what the strategy is for addressing it. Next slide. So how it works. For a standalone PIP, the analysis of the proposed plan is performed, including a review of the forecasted financials if there's a financial concern. The plan is deemed to be adequately addressed in the action plan. Then the property rating is reduced. Now we do a risk rating internally to determine where we are with the entire portfolio. And so when a action plan is placed in a PIP, we reduce the risk. So it's no longer hitting the top of the list. That monitoring cadence is also adjusted. So rather than an annual review, if we feel that there's an opportunity to observe improvements in performance, we may come out sooner, or we may review it sooner, say 6 months. If many of the indicators don't begin to show improvements for 12 months, so we'll go back to that 12-month cadence, but it's priority 12 months, so it's going to happen earlier in the year. But we continue to do that process until a property improvement plan is no longer needed, or that a plan needs to be changed. So maybe just the cadence needs to be changed, maybe we change the priorities, or maybe we scrap that one and we start with a new plan. But all of that is in engagement with our partners to determine what that plan should be. I wish I could say yes, because that sounds really wonderful. So I don't know if you're familiar with our ProLink system. It's our system of record at the agency. We're still trying to figure out how to fully implement all of the features of that, and maybe there's something that will come out of that. I love that idea, and we'll definitely take it back to my my portfolio support team. We also have a dedicated team that works on information systems, including ProLink, and I'll put that bug in their ear as well. Thank you for that question. Yeah. So there's a timeline associated with your property improvement plans, and once that time is exhausted, immediately the risk rating goes back up because we still have a problem or we haven't determined that the problem's been solved. We do that engagement with folks. If the problem has been resolved, the risk rating drops down to a normal cadence, everything goes back to business, and we wait for the next ripple to happen, right? Or we make a change to the plan and we re-implement it and we go back at it and see how it's looking after a couple of months. Next slide. So what does a PIP actually do, right? So I've kind of told you, what goes into it, but what's the benefit of that? The purpose of any oversight, of course, is to identify and mitigate risks, and doing that in partnership helps to ensure that the Oregon's affordable rental housing stock is protected and that it's given all of the investment that it needs to be able to go for as long as possible without additional investment. In most instances, our partners already have a plan. This mechanism is to get that plan to include us in the conversation, keep us knowledgeable. Your asset management team wants to know what what strategies are. Those that don't actually have a plan or aren't really sure what to do, we can share some insight that we have maybe from experience that other properties may be having, or our own level of expertise, some things that we've learned over the years, our school of hard knocks in some cases, in my case for sure. And to just get into engagement and strategize for solutions. In either event, our intentional engagement with our partners is important to relationship building. And those objectives contribute to the long-term stabilization of the state's affordable rental housing inventory at large. Next slide. I think that is back to you. Oh. That's evil because the call is hers. But I love this idea, and I'm happy to talk about it if you're serious. So last week, Tuesday, I believe it was, Affordable rental housing development side does a partner call, and it wasn't dedicated to just development, but it was the voice that we heard at most occasions. I think I actually contributed to a couple of small topics over the years, but this call is dedicated to the ongoing operations for existing affordable rental housing properties. And as you can imagine, every type of funding that's ever been thought of, even for just maybe 2 weeks, landed in portfolio. So we're managing that. So the topics are very broad. And I think that the need to have a dedicated meeting to share out information, to update things, to take in information is instrumental to building that relationship and that partnership that we spoke of. So last week, Terry's team was able to implement our very first one. I think we have a dedicated agenda that we plan to share out, and some topics that we've already identified. One of those that's coming up, I think we're talking about CCPCs. Anybody know what that is? A test. Anybody that's not from OHCS know what CCPC stands for? Almost. It's Certificate of Continued Compliance, Certification of Continued Compliance. And we test ourselves about that all the time. But I really love the CCPCs. So much easier to say. We have one scheduled for CCPCs. In October, we have the PUSH legislation and compliance with PUSH. There have been some updates that you all need to know about. It's really important. And I'd love to open that up for conversation so people begin to understand what that really means. And to be PUSH eligible is more like PUSH subject, and we'll talk about that. And then the Rent Increase Policy. I'm going to talk about that today too, but we'll do some more in December.
Second Tuesday of every month, 3 to 4 Pacific Standard Time.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about the rent increase policy. I get a lot of questions about this policy, and so the first thing I want to do, I'm going to run through a bunch of slides real quick just to give you some insight as to what things look like. But first, I think I need to give you a little bit of history, and there's some transitions in here. I don't know where these came from, but they happened. So one more, and I think that gets that slide filled. Okay, so there are 3. So let me give you some history, and then I'll come back to those. And I'm going to read a little bit. I apologize. So in the policy that we have at OHCS originated in 2018, and it was developed in response to rapid economic expansion that occurred as we came out of the recession. And it was approved by the Housing Stability Council at that time. And then in June 2020, changes were made to the rent increase policy, in part because of Senate Bill 608, which implemented a statewide cap, and that cap actually exempted affordable rental housing at that time. So the policy that we had in place obviously needed to continue. It had an important role in an ongoing capacity. More facts coming right up. With the passage of House Bill 3113 in 2021, which became effective in January of 2022, affordable rental housing was no longer considered to be exempt from that policy. And so state statutory limitations were increased, and initiating the renewed dialogue around this rent increase cap and how we could participate in managing that. Both spectrums, right? So the spectrum from which we want to make sure that tenants aren't overburdened, but on the asset management side of things, it kills me to think that we're not doing what we need to do to keep the properties up. So there's this balance, right? And then in 2023, the Oregon legislature passed changing the statewide annual cap to 7% plus CPI or 10%, whichever is lesser. And so so the policy, of course, was necessary to help maintain some of that balance. And then to give some context, we wanted to make it as simple as possible. I have submitted rent increases myself to OHCS before I became an OHCS staff. So I know the process is arduous. I also had RD properties, so I know what that process looks like, and trying to figure out the best way to help create a self sustaining process was my goal. So there are three ways with which a rent increase affects your properties at OHCS. One is a rent increase notification. So our policy already adopts an approval, automatic approval for anything at 5% or less for your properties. You can also go to program max upon unit turns without getting approval for that. You don't even need to include it. We used to call that bifurcated rents. I don't. We have a lot of bifurcated rents as a result of that. I no longer refer to that in the policy at all. But the rent increase notification is what we call the RIN. We love our acronyms. We have the rent rate approval because OHCS issued home and Housing Trust Fund HTF properties are required by HUD, excuse me, to submit their annual rent charts every year. And so that's just part of that process. So we call that the RRA. You'll see that here in a couple more slides. And then we have the rent increase review. That's for rent increases, what we also call the elevated rent increase. And those are for the rent increases that are greater than 5%, but of course are lesser than the 7% plus CPI or 10%. Next slide. So I want to run through a couple of what those look like. This is an available link on our website, and once you click on that link, it takes you to this smart sheet, and it asks for just a couple of basic information to get you going. So on the rent increase notification form, which is the most common and easiest way to submit information related to a rent increase, is for those that are 5% or below, is to ask for just the basic information. And then if you'll click on the next, there we go. The bottom of the form asks for a little bit of additional information. Here we go, that transition stuff again. All right. And then, so this is the rent increase notification. Yes, we implemented a worksheet this last year because the information that we were getting that demonstrated notification to tenants was blank. I was getting the blank template with nothing in it. So when compliance went to do a review to make sure that everything was as it should be, there was not enough information to tell. So what we've implemented, we're hoping is not too much of a lift, but it gives us what we need to know. And it also helps you in year to year to know what you submitted last year. So you can see you can't see actually, as it turns out. The very first thing that we ask for is the unit type and then the rent rates related to that unit type. You may have only 2-3 types, but your range of rents can be a high and a low because you've got that bifurcation thing that we don't talk about anymore. All right, next slide. And then a closer look just shows you what's on there. And it actually shows the unit type, the AMI, current rent range, the max, the program max, and then the rent rates and utility allowance. Okay. The rent rate approval, again, for the OHCS issued home and the Housing Trust Fund, the worksheet is similar, or the smart sheet is very similar in what it asks for, but it has a couple little caveats to it. If you click that your rent increase is greater than 5%, it's going to tell you need to go to the RIN. If you click on this and it says it's not home, then it's going to tell you that you need to go to the RIR. And one or the other. I'm no longer telling which one's which. Okay, go ahead to the next. Yes, it does. Gives you some guidance. It also has a worksheet. This worksheet has a little bit more information that it requests on it. Also hoping to guide you through some of this, the unit type, the AMI, the lowest home rent, the high home rents, et cetera, et cetera. Go ahead. Next slide. And then our all-time favorite, the rent increase request. This is for greater than 5% increases, or what we call elevated increases. Ask for similar information on the top side of the smart sheet. Go ahead. The bottom half asks for a little bit more and also includes those little guidance. So if you click that it's this, yes, it's going to guide you to the different worksheets that you need to do. On the worksheet, it's very similar to the other worksheets in that it asks for the unit type, AMI, high and lows, max rents. But there's other tabs on this one. Go ahead. The bottom of that first worksheet has this box. That box is really critical to getting your request considered. And that's because it's an opportunity for you to tell your story. Because here's the thing, if you believe that your property needs this rent increase to maintain its operations and for its future success, then we want that for you too. But we need you to tell us that story. You need to give us some details, because it's our senior asset management analyst will take this information, put it into a presentation, and then take it to finance committee and say, we want you to approve this rent increase. And these are the reasons why they need it. And this is why I'm advocating that they increase this rent and that you approve it. The worksheet is very similar. The second tab of the worksheet is a rent burden worksheet that we evaluate the impact to the tenants, because finance committee wants to know that. They're very reticent to approve a rent increase that's going to burden the tenants greater than a 40%. So we have to have a really good defense for that. I don't think I've ever managed to get anything over 50% through finance committee. There are those instances. Some of those can happen when we do an analysis and there are 2 or 3 tenants or households that are going to bump that tenant rent burden up. If there's a defense for that, there's a strategy for how those tenants are going to be handled over the course of that next year. Maybe they're going to only see titrated increases that they can manage, or maybe there's some other plan for that. We can tell that story. We can get that rent increase considered by finance committee. So that box is really important. And then the calculations that we do on the rent burden worksheet also help. So we do a pre and a post. The last tab, because this is the more complex version of the rent increase processes, we give a step-by-step instructions on how to move through all of those various worksheets and questions. And we also offer some examples here as well. Okay. Oh, more stuff. So basically, I just wanted to share with you guys what this process looks like and who manages this. We have our administrative support staff monitor the inbox. They submit the information to whoever's assigned to that particular portfolio, and then we begin that engagement. While we love to turn these requests around really fast, that's kind of like our personal goal. We can't always guarantee that. One of the implications for how fast we can turn these around is sometimes property management companies will do all of their rent increases at the same time. That hits the same person at the same time. So if they're related properties, we can often present to finance committee on multiples at the same time. We can just explain this is so-and-so's portfolio. They're experiencing these same problems at all of these, and we can run those through. But we still have to take the time to prepare those documents and to prepare the individual proposals. So it can delay. I do have some stats, though, to share because I monitor that. I think the next slide might. I've kind of lost it. Oh, you've got it. You have it handled. Thank you. So I monitor the activity of the Smart Sheet activity for each one of those processes, and I wanted to share some stats with you. I report those also to not only Tanya Evans, but also to Natasha, as well as Andrea. So this information goes up. I'm accountable to those numbers, and so we work really hard to keep those optimal. The policy does allow us 90 days to approve a rent increase request for a RIR, the RIR. And I hate to ever get to 90 days because I know what that looks like for you guys. The risk is that we can approve that rent increase approval the day before you implement it. So like on the 30th, if you're implementing it on the 1st, the problem is that if we don't approve it, you get to start your noticing all over, and that's a drag. So I tell you that with a caveat that if you're down to the wire and you're trying to get this through and you know we're going to approve it, we just got to get the information to the finance committee to approve it, then that risk might be worth taking, right? And the number one thing to know about that is to get into communication with your asset management staff at OHCS, because we can help, especially if we understand what you're up against and if you understand what we're up against. So if you're coming at us saying, I've got 25 rent increases I'm submitting today, then we can get some staff to help us. But here's some stats for you. From July of 2024 through, from July of 2024 through June of 2025, I think that's the year, right? We processed 73 rent increase requests, so the RIRs, and 86 rent increase approvals in that time. We averaged approximately 35 days to process those. And that doesn't include the time that it took us to get all the information that we needed that didn't get submitted in the first place. And we received 304 rent increase notices, so the 5% or below. What that tells me is, although our policy applies to a lot more than we're seeing, there obviously are those that aren't being submitted to us. And what's going to happen is my compliance teams are going to figure it out. And then you're going to be held non-compliant with the policy when they do their review. So be talking to your senior asset management analyst if you discover that you're one of those properties that have not been submitting anything, and let us help you with that. But basically, I wanted to sum things up with a couple of just quick messages to you on this topic. While we can't guarantee the turnaround time, I think getting into to dialogue with us about that is going to be an advantage no matter what you do. That was a big one for me, and I've already talked about it. And then the other is advocation. If you believe you need that rent increase, we want that rent increase for you. So let's get into conversation. Let's make that happen and get that information into your application so that we can get that for you as well. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Terry.
We're actually going to turn it back over to you guys. Questions. We love questions. And we love partnering with you and this lovely lady up front. Yes.
Yeah, so the question is, how do we know what our risk rating is? And so it's an OHCS internal mechanism. But what I would like to say, and we're not there yet, as Terry said, we're like 9 months into this new model, but the goal is to get everybody on the same cadence. And that means that we'll review your properties on an annual basis. And if you're at risk, if you rate high, like I mentioned earlier, you're going to know, because we're going to be calling you up. We're going to be sending you the text. We're going to send you the email. What's going on with your property? We'd love to hear more about what your solution is to this issue. And so, and sometimes it's an isolated, something that peaked in our review financials, and then we determine that that is a non-issue, and then we just go back to our normal cadence. But if you're at high risk, the goal is that you're going to know it, because we're going to reach out. It's going to take us a little while to get there. We're still catching up from COVID, just like you folks are. And so, yeah, that's the answer. Right now, we do have a list of properties that are on our watch list that we're still getting to, and that's when we're making that email communication. Do we need to talk about maybe setting up a property improvement plan for you? Thank you.
Thanks for the question. Any more? Don't be shy. Oh, we get another one up here in the front.
So what are our partners, when we tell them that the rent burden's not going to get past finance committee? 5% and 5% and 5%. One of the things that we have begun to have a conversation about is the longevity, because we know that your properties were stood up with a pro forma that implemented 3% and 5% expense rates, and that we're not seeing. The reality isn't the same. And so we're asking that that information be shared with us, maybe in a property improvement plan even, because we have a tab in the property improvement plan that shows the pro forma. So you can show that if you don't implement that 6% or that 10% in this year and then subsequent at 5%, that you're not going to be able to take care of this property for more than about 4 more years. That information should get shared with us so that we can help get those through. But I'll tell you that the finance committee is like, they're like, this is not the tenant's problem to solve, right? So then they're back to us. Well, what do you expect us to do with that, right? We can't envision making this a tenant problem, so come to us with a different idea. One of those ideas happens to be our, let me see if I can remember what PSI stands for now. It is Portfolio Investment Strategy. So that's one option, right? Maybe there's an opportunity to pay down some debt and get your expense and income ratios alleviated, basically. And that strategy, you can have dialogue with your senior asset management analyst about what that might look like, and then we'll connect you with our great TA team over here. This is Kate right here, and talk about what that application process might look like and what the opportunities are. It is very limited, and so we don't have a lot of it. We wish we had a lot more, but it may be one strategy. Perfect. Beautiful. Thank you. So I think that there's going to be some announcements made this afternoon. I know that we asked for a heck of a lot more, but I want to say that it's coming in at about 35 mil. Hey, that's good, Chris Linka. Kudos. Yes.
On both your slides about the rent increases, there was a note about bifurcation of rents. What bifurcations are we allowed to do?
So bifurcation is when you've got tenants coming in at different times. And so you can go to program max at unit turn. So they're going to be at the highest, right? But your last 6 months ago, you rented to somebody who came in at a lower amount. So that bifurcation is as a result of that. Did that make sense?
Yeah, I thought maybe different units could do different rent increases.
That would be a lot of fun to manage, I'm sure. Good question, though. If you want to do that, knock yourself out. Just stick within program max and your approvals. Somebody else back there have a hand up? That's a great question, and I would love to tell you yes, but I'm not so sure that's the answer.
I would say reach, depending on where you're at, but technically no. Once the 8609s have been issued, it's it's irrevocable. Depending on where you're at in your development, if you're not sure, reach out to your production analyst, or just to ask those questions. But once you're at a certain spot, IRS says it's your stock. So great question.
And I think that question's coming up more often than I thought, actually, because I think people are beginning to realize the benefit of doing the average income testing strategy. And so I'm looking forward, while they're a lot harder to manage, right? You got that, next tenant, the next available unit rule. They're also harder to monitor. But we think that the benefit to the tenants by far outweighs that additional burden, for lack of a better word. Anybody else out there? I think we're down to the wire on time. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I hope that you got the message that if you want that rent increase and you need it, then tell us about that. And if you have a property that's having a struggle, talk to us about a property improvement plan so that we can strategize together and get that on record. So thank you.